Anna Clark, known by many as one of the brightest and most talented teachers of English literature, lived what many considered an exemplary life. She was only 34 years old, and her fate, at first glance, presented an ideal picture of a calm, meaningful existence. It seemed that all the ingredients for success were already present: a prestigious position at the oldest university in the country, marriage to a wise and balanced man named Mark, a cozy house on the outskirts of the city, full of warm light and soft shades. But behind this external harmony, a drama was slowly unfolding, which neither Anna nor her entourage could yet fully comprehend. Every morning Anna woke up in a spacious bedroom, where the white curtains fluttered in the morning wind, and a thin ray of sun fell on the lid of her antique desk. Peace always reigned within these walls. Neat rows of books with leather spines stood on the shelves, elegant dresses, dim but stylish, hung in the closet. In the living room, the aroma of freshly brewed coffee mingled with the faint scent of soap and lemon cleaning products. Here, in this house, Mark loved to leisurely leaf through newspapers, sitting on a gray sofa and looking at his wife, busy with her business. The university where Anna worked was located in the center of the old city, and its majestic red brick walls had been part of the landscape for centuries. Initially, the building was a monastery, then a reform school, and only over time it turned into one of the most famous universities in the country. Its facade, covered with ivy, seemed to be an eternal keeper of ancient secrets. Generations of students walked along the narrow, slightly curved corridors, from young, still hesitant newcomers to confident graduates who will soon leave these walls, taking with them both knowledge and memories. Portraits of former rectors hung on the walls, and carpets with elegant patterns lay on the floor, softening the echo of footsteps. And in the classrooms there were heavy wooden pulpits, carved chairs, and tall bookcases, letting in the iridescent light of table lamps through the glass doors. Anna taught English literature as if she was opening up entire worlds to her listeners. She could read the lines of Shakespeare or Austen so that they could feel the living pulse of the era. Her lectures attracted full audiences. Students sat not only on chairs, but also on window sills, sometimes standing in the aisles, afraid to miss even a word. This love of literature was not feigned. Anna herself greedily absorbed the meaning, looked for parallels with real life between the lines, and taught her students to look deeper under the smooth surface of phrases behind the scenery of the plot. For a long time, Anna believed that she had achieved that very ideal. She had the respect of her colleagues, the admiration of her students, and a reliable rear in the person of Mark. Their marriage was outwardly flawless. For 7 years they shared joys and hardships. Mark, a man of average height with neatly trimmed brown hair and a calm voice, worked as an architect in a large firm. His projects were always clearly calibrated, and there was a sense of logical intelligence and professionalism in them. At home, he loved to tell Anna about his plans, how he planned to build a skylight or how best to distribute space in a new office building. Anna listened warmly, but often found herself wandering to something else. But once upon a time they discussed everything in the world: a new exhibition in a museum, the premiere of an opera, philosophical ideas read in an essay by Virginia Woolf. Over time, their conversations became predictable, impersonal, as if each knew in advance what the other would say. The first alarm bell for Anna was her meeting with Nick Harris. He was one of the new university teachers who had just arrived from London. Tall, fit, with lively gray eyes, he seemed the complete opposite of Mark. Nick was passionate, laid back, and approached life with a touch of irony. Their first acquaintance occurred at the department, when Anna accidentally heard him enthusiastically arguing about the work of T.S. Eliot with another colleague. His point of view was unconventional, challenging, but undoubtedly thoughtful. Anna, usually reserved in communication, felt interest flaring up inside. Since then, they often crossed paths in the corridors, at the pulpit, at joint lunches, and each time Anna caught herself waiting for their conversations. Anna Clark herself did not notice how changes began in her life. At first glance, everything was as before. She went to work, prepared for lectures, returned home, where Mark met her for a warm dinner. But internally, Anna felt that something had changed. Meetings with Nick became the spark that made her think about her life. about what she really wants. Each time their conversations became deeper. Anna and Nick discussed not only literature, but also personal topics, views on life, art, freedom. Nick, with his sharp mind and ease, could awaken in her those emotions that she had long considered forgotten. Anna noticed how her heart began to beat faster when she saw him in the university corridor, how her eyes searched for him in the crowd of students. One day, at a regular department meeting, Nick invited her to have coffee after work. Anna hesitated, but agreed. They met in a small, cozy cafe on the corner, where it was quiet, only the faint clink of dishes breaking the silence. Nick was relaxed, joking and telling stories about his life in London. Anna laughed, but an alarm sounded in her head. What was she doing? Why is she here? But the voice was weak, muffled by the desire to feel alive. The next day, she couldn't get their meeting out of her mind. Anna felt guilty towards Mark, but at the same time she felt strangely excited. Every day her craving for Nick became stronger. Her looks, her gestures, even her tone of voice in his presence betrayed the feelings she was trying to hide. The decisive moment came in the evening when the university organized its annual faculty ball. Anna spent a long time choosing a dress, settling on a dark blue one that emphasized her figure. Mark couldn't go because of urgent work, so she went alone. The ball took place in an ancient hall, lit by hundreds of candles. Anna noticed Nick almost immediately. He stood by the window with a glass of wine, and when their eyes met, he smiled. This smile seemed to confirm that there was something more between them. Later, when the music changed to slow, Nick asked her to dance. His arms wrapped around her waist, and Anna felt the warmth of his body. They didn't say a word, but there was a tense energy in the air. After the dance, Nick suggested we go out into the fresh air. They found themselves on a dark terrace where the lights of the city flickered in the distance. Nick spoke first. Anna, do you understand that we can't continue to pretend that nothing is happening? You feel it just like I do. Anna wanted to object, but could not find the words. Instead, she looked down, trying to collect her thoughts. Nick came closer, and her breathing quickened. You've been in your cage for too long, he continued quietly. Don't you want to feel free? These words struck her heart, awakening everything that she had suppressed for so long. She raised her head, and their eyes met again. Nick leaned in slowly, and the next moment their lips met. This kiss was soft, but it contained passion that had long been dormant in Anna. Anna Clark returned home late, and the house greeted her with darkness. Mark was already asleep. The warm light of the night lamp made its way from under the door of their bedroom, but Anna did not dare to enter. Instead, she stayed in the living room, sat on the sofa, and felt a wave of anxiety wash over her. She held a glass of wine in her hands, but instead of drinking it, she simply watched the red liquid vibrate. Her thoughts were racing like a wounded bird stuck in a cage. Kissing Nick wasn't just a mistake. It was a moment that awakened in her those feelings that she had hidden deep inside for so long. It was desire, passion, but also something more, the feeling that she had finally begun to breathe deeply. But at what cost? The next morning Mark was calm as always. He brewed coffee, made toast, and, suspecting nothing, talked about the new project. Anna tried to listen, but her gaze kept lingering on his hands, on his face. She saw how caring he was, how carefully he tried to maintain their cozy world. But instead of the usual gratitude, her heart sank with guilt. At university, she tried to distract herself with work. The lectures were more difficult than usual. The words came out mechanical, and the students seemed to begin to notice her absent-mindedness. When the lecture ended, Anna quickly gathered her things and headed to her office, hoping to hide from her own thoughts. But as soon as she closed the door, there was a knock. Nick stood on the threshold, his gray eyes full of determination. "We need to talk," he said quietly, entering the office and closing the door behind him. Anna stood with her arms crossed over her chest, trying to maintain a semblance of calm. "About what?" she asked, although she knew the answer. "About us." Nick took a step forward. "Anna, I can't hide this anymore. I need you. We both know it." "This is wrong," she interrupted, but her voice trembled. "I have a husband." We have a life that we have been building for years. But does this life make you happy? Nick looked at her intently. You don't answer, because you know the truth. His words struck a nerve in her. She turned away, not wanting him to see the tears gathering in her eyes. Nick, this is impossible. We can't destroy everything for, t- for the sake of what is real, he finished for her, coming closer. Anna, I'm not asking you to make a decision right now, but you have to be honest with yourself. What do you want? He left, leaving her completely confused. All day Anna felt as if in a fog. Colleagues noticed her reticence, students asked fewer questions, as if they were afraid to disturb her. When she returned home, Mark was in the kitchen preparing dinner. He smiled at her, but Anna could not return the same. At night, she lay awake for a long time. Mark was breathing calmly next to her, and her thoughts returned to Nick again and again. She was overcome by conflicting feelings. On the one hand, the desire to be with Nick; on the other, the fear of losing what she knew and was accustomed to. The next day, the university was preparing for an important conference. Anna was scheduled to give a lecture on the role of female characters in Victorian literature. She prepared carefully, but when the moment came, her voice trembled. Nick was in the audience. His gaze was directed at her, and she felt her confidence melting under this gaze. After the lecture, a colleague, Sarah, with whom Anna had been friends for a long time, approached her. "You're not like that today," Sarah remarked, putting her hand on her shoulder. "Everything is fine." Anna nodded, but felt that her mask was cracking. Sarah looked at her intently, as if trying to understand what was happening. "If something happened, you can tell me," she added softly. "Everything is fine, really," Anna lied, but inside she felt as if she had been exposed. That evening she met Nick again. He was waiting for her at the exit from the university. His gaze was serious, but at the same time there was hope in it. "I can't pretend anymore," he began when they stopped at an old oak tree in the university courtyard. "You changed my life, Anna. I'm not asking you to give up everything immediately, but I want to know, do we have a chance?" Anna was silent. She looked at his face, at this mixture of passion and vulnerability, and felt two voices fighting inside her. One said that she should be loyal to her family, the other that she should follow her heart. Her choice was approaching, and whatever path she chose, he promised to change everything. Anna knew that she could no longer return to her old life. There was only one question left. Was she ready to risk everything in order to feel alive again? Mark was a man of logic and order. Since his youth, he was attracted to architecture and art where beauty is combined with precision. He could talk for hours about proportions, balance, and the play of light, and this was not just a profession, but a way of looking at the world. In this world, everything had to be in its place, both in his drawings, where every millimeter was verified, and in life. Marriage to Anna was confirmation for Mark that he was moving on the right path. He was always proud of her intelligence, sophistication, her ability to captivate listeners and subtly analyze the most complex works. He watched with admiration as she prepared for lectures, sometimes asking questions himself to hear her enthusiastically explain the details. These moments seemed to him proof that they were an ideal couple where each complemented the other. However, behind the facade of a calm family life, Mark began to notice changes. Anna increasingly lost herself in her thoughts, her smile became less frequent, and her conversations became more and more superficial. He tried to talk to her about it, but her answers were evasive, sometimes even irritated. Mark blamed himself. He thought he might be spending too much time on work, giving too few surprises, or simply not being attentive enough. He started trying harder, suggesting trips together, choosing the wine she liked, even once booking tickets to a show she mentioned in passing. But his efforts did not seem to have the expected effect. For Mark, marriage was not only a union of love, but also a partnership. He believed in honesty, in support, and in solving difficulties together. It seemed to him that his union with Anna was exactly like this, based on respect and deep trust. He saw his parents spend their entire lives together and wanted the same. However, something in his relationship with Anna began to crumble, and he could not understand what it was. His logical mind demanded to find a reason, but the answer eluded him. Mark had no idea about Anna's passion for Nick. He was not a man prone to jealousy, but sometimes, catching his wife's distant gaze, noticing her long delays at university or strange fluctuations in her voice, he felt a slight anxiety. He pushed these thoughts away, convincing himself that it was just stress or fatigue. But a deep part of his soul understood that something important was changing. One evening, when Anna returned home late, Mark felt that his patience was running out. He looked at her for a long time, trying to find the familiar warmth in her face, the woman he had once loved. But Anna avoided his gaze and retreated into herself. Mark didn't ask questions, afraid to hear an answer he wouldn't like. Instead, he went to his office and opened the folder with the design of the new building, trying to find solace in his usual work. However, his thoughts still returned to Anna. Why did she change? What did he do wrong? Mark tried to be the best husband for her, but something still went wrong. He began to wonder if it was possible that their perfect life was just an illusion. Anna woke up from a bright light breaking through the thick curtains of the bedroom. The evening spent on the university terrace with Nick continued to echo in her head with words and memories of the kiss. But this day promised to be ordinary: lectures, students, familiar routes. She tried to suppress her confusion and return to normal life, but fate seemed to have decided to make its own adjustments. In the morning, rushing to work, Anna discovered that her car refused to start. Mark had already left for a meeting with a client, so she called a taxi. When the driver announced that he could only arrive in 30 minutes, Anna felt slightly irritated. She needed to be on time for her first lecture. She was about to cancel the class when she suddenly heard a voice behind her. Problems with the car. Anna turned around and saw Nick. He stood by his car, holding a coffee cup in his hands. Fate brought them together again at the moment when Anna least expected it. "Yes, it won't start," she answered, feeling her pulse quicken, "and I'm rushing to the university." Nick smiled, as if the very fact of this meeting was destined for him. "Let me give you a ride. I'm still going in the same direction." Anna hesitated. Her inner voice kept saying that this was a bad idea, but time was running out, and she nodded. They drove in silence, only quiet music playing in the background. Nick was clearly enjoying the moment, in no hurry to start a conversation, and Anna furtively glanced at his profile, admiring the ease with which he perceived the world. "You know," Nick suddenly spoke, "sometimes it seems to me that accidents are not accidental at all." Anna looked at him, but did not answer. There was something attractive in his words, as if he was hinting that their meeting today was predestined. When they arrived at the university, Anna thanked Nick and got out of the car. She intended to return to her usual activities, but he suddenly stopped her. "Anna, let's have lunch together. No pressure, just lunch. You won't refuse the company of your colleague, will you?" Her heart sank. Still struggling with guilt, she hesitated but agreed. They met in a small restaurant near the university. Nick ordered 2 coffees and a light lunch. Their conversation turned personal again. Nick talked about his life in London, about how he left his career to teach in order to feel freer. "When was the last time you felt free?" he suddenly asked, piercing her with his gaze. Anna frozen. She realized that she could not remember such a moment. Her life was carefully ordered, but did that make her happy? Lunch passed quickly. When Anna was about to leave, Nick held her hand. "You're afraid of what you feel," he said quietly, "but that doesn't mean it's wrong." At that moment, something inside her broke. As if fatigue from constant struggle and the desire to feel alive outweighed all fears. Anna leaned towards him and whispered, "You don't understand anything. Everything is much more complicated." Nick looked at her with understanding, but instead of answering, he did what she most feared and desired at the same time. He kissed her again, this time in the middle of a cozy restaurant where time seemed to stand still. This moment became the point of no return. Anna didn't resist. She knew she could no longer deny her feelings. After lunch, she returned to the university, but thoughts of Nick haunted her. When she returned home that evening, Mark was there as usual. He cooked dinner and discussed his new project with her. Anna looked at him, realizing that she was hurting him with her silence. But she couldn't stop what had already begun. The next day, Anna met Nick after work. They went to the same cafe again, but this time they didn't pretend that it was just friendship. Their relationship became more and more deep and passionate. She started making excuses to spend more time with him. Every kiss, every touch brought her that feeling of freedom that she had not experienced for so long. But Anna understood. The secret would sooner or later be revealed. Her choice had already been made, but the consequences were just beginning to emerge. She didn't know where this romance would lead, but for the first time in many years, she felt alive. The next morning, Mark announced that he was going on an unexpected business trip. He was excited about a new project, a large office complex that required attention and precision. Trying to remain caring, he suggested that Anna not worry about everyday life during his absence, and even left her a list of small tasks that needed to be done in the house. Anna, feeling heavy with guilt, just nodded and hugged him before leaving. "Take care of yourself," Mark said quietly as he left. His gaze lingered on her face longer than usual, as if he was trying to understand something. When Mark left, the house fell into silence, which this time did not bring peace. Anna felt her heart beating faster than usual. She knew that now nothing would stop her from taking the next step. Nick wrote her a message. "Dinner. I have a bottle of excellent wine and a couple of stories that I've been wanting to tell you for a long time." Anna looked at the phone screen for a long time before answering. "Meet me at 8. She spent the whole day deciding how to look for this dinner. Her inner voice insisted that this was wrong, but something stronger, more primal, pushed her forward. She chose a simple but elegant black silk dress. It emphasized her figure, but did not look provocative. Her hair, usually styled in a formal updo, was cascading over her shoulders today. When she approached Nick's apartment, her heart was literally jumping out of her chest. He met her at the door, dressed in a light pullover and dark trousers. His gaze, full of warmth and expectation, immediately made her relax. "You are beautiful," he said, smiling. They started the evening with a light conversation over wine. Nick was easy to talk to, and his charisma attracted Anna like a magnet. He talked about his travels, about how he once got lost in a small town in Italy, and how he found the best coffee of his life there. Anna laughed, but her thoughts kept returning to his eyes, to the way he looked at her. When dinner was over, Nick suggested moving into the living room. There, by the fireplace, there was a comfortable sofa, and on the walls hung paintings with abstract motifs. He poured them another glass of wine and then sat down next to her. His closeness was palpable, the tension between them almost unbearable. "Anna," he said quietly, touching her hand, "I have long wanted to tell you how much you inspire me. You are special. With you, I feel like I can be real." His words sounded so sincere that Anna could not help herself. She looked at him, and their eyes met. It was a moment when time seemed to stand still. Nick slowly leaned down, their lips met, and this kiss was full of passion and tenderness at the same time. Anna felt the whole world around her disappear. There were only them two people who found in each other what they had been missing for so long. Nick picked her up and carefully carried her into the bedroom. There, in the soft light of the night lamp, their touches became even more daring. Nick's every movement was imbued with care and desire. He looked carefully into her eyes, as if he could read every emotion in them. Anna answered him with the same passion. She felt how her body and mind were freed from all shackles, how she became herself a woman who had long forgotten what it meant to be loved. The night was filled with quiet words, touches, and a mutual desire to feel each other closer. For the first time in many years, Anna felt that her desires and feelings were important. Nick was there, he was real, and she couldn't think about the future, about the consequences. All that mattered to her was this moment. When morning came, Anna woke up to a faint light coming through the curtains. Nick was still sleeping next to her, his arm resting on her waist. Anna quietly got up and went to the window. She was overcome by a mixed feeling of happiness and anxiety. She knew that this night would change everything. She crossed the line beyond which there was no turning back. Nick woke up and approached her. Hugging her from behind, he whispered, "I don't want this to end." Anna felt her eyes fill with tears. She wanted to answer, but didn't know what to say. She knew one thing: this night was real, but the reality she had to return to was waiting for her outside. Anna tried to act as if nothing had changed, but her anxiety grew every day. The secret relationship with Nick was becoming more and more difficult for her, and Mark's return from a business trip brought the moment of truth closer. Anna, not used to such situations, made a fatal mistake, which Mark quickly noticed. After a night with Nick, Anna forgot a small but noticeable detail in his apartment: her favorite scarf with embroidered initials, which Mark had once given her. Nick found it and, without thinking, put it in his coat pocket, intending to return it the next time they met. However, at the next departmental meeting, where both Anna and Mark were present, Nick mistakenly left his coat in the classroom, from where it ended up in the teacher's locker room. Mark arrived at the university unexpectedly to pick up Anna after work and invite her to dinner. While he was waiting for her near the office, he noticed a familiar handkerchief sticking out of the pocket of someone else's coat. Taking it in his hands, he immediately recognized the embroidery and realized that it was Anna's thing. His face turned pale, and his heart sank with an unpleasant feeling. Mark didn't raise the question right away, but his mind, accustomed to analysis and logic, began to put the pieces together. Anna has been distracted lately, her gaze often wanders, and delays at work have become more frequent. Now he had real reason to doubt. Mark, standing at the pulpit with Anna's handkerchief in his hands, felt how his usual, orderly world began to collapse. My heart was beating heavily, as if someone had squeezed it into a fist. He wanted to believe that it was just an accident, that his wife could have forgotten her handkerchief anywhere, but cold logic did not allow him this weakness. He was a man accustomed to finding patterns, noticing the slightest deviations from the usual, and now these deviations have become too obvious to ignore. Scenes of their lives over the past weeks flashed through Mark's head. His mind, like a builder, was putting together the bricks of events: her absent-minded glances, evasive answers, delays at work. Just yesterday, he could have attributed it to fatigue or stress, but now he had proof, albeit indirect. A handkerchief that should have been at home ended up in a strange man's coat. Mark looked at himself in the reflection of the glass door. His face was tense, his eyes betraying a mixture of pain, confusion, and anger. He always believed in honesty, that his marriage with Anna was strong, based on respect and trust. But this small, insignificant at first glance object, a scarf, seemed to be a symbol of betrayal. When Anna left the office and approached Mark, he put the handkerchief in his pocket and smiled at her. But his smile was forced, like a mask hiding the storm inside. He was a master of self-control, and now, more than ever, this quality helped him not to break down. Mark decided not to ask questions right now. He needed more information, more certainty, before he was ready to face the truth. As an architect, he knew that before destroying an old building, you need to understand what parts of it can be saved. If there was still room for repair in their relationship, he wanted to find it. That same night, sitting in his office, Mark made a decision that was not easy for him. He opened his laptop and started searching for private detective agencies. The thought that he had to keep an eye on his wife made him feel ashamed, but he understood that he would not be able to understand the situation otherwise. "I must know the truth, whatever it may be," Mark said to himself. He felt that with every second his calm was leaving room for anxiety and suspicion. It seemed to him that he was betraying Anna by hiring someone to spy on her, but at the same time he understood. If she betrayed him first, he had the right to know. The next day, Mark met with the detective in a small cafe outside the city. A middle-aged man, with a tenacious gaze and an even voice, asked him questions and wrote down details. Mark told everything he noticed: the scarf, delays at work, changes in Anna's behavior. "I need to know," Mark said, clenching his hands into fists under the table. "Don't just suspect. I have to be sure." The detective, remaining professionally neutral, assured Mark that he would begin work immediately. When the meeting ended, Mark remained sitting in the car, staring at one point for a long time. He felt both betrayed and guilty. But most of all, he felt anger growing inside him. Not at Anna, not at the detective, but at himself. Because he couldn't notice it earlier, for allowing their marriage to get to this point. Now all that was left was to wait. And although Mark has always been a patient person, waiting for this truth seemed to him the most difficult test in his life. Mark felt lost. His world, so carefully built, began to crumble. Every minute of waiting for results from the detective dragged on like an hour. He continued to lead his usual life, but every day it became more and more difficult for him to look Anna in the eyes. Her smiles seemed forced to him, and her usual conversations seemed empty. He tried to find meaning in her actions, a justification for her changes, but cold logic again and again returned him to the thought of betrayal. A few days later, the detective called Mark and asked to meet. They agreed to meet in the same cafe where they discussed the case for the first time. When Mark entered, the detective was already waiting for him at the corner table. There was a folder with documents on the table. The detective's face was calm, professional, but Mark felt his throat go dry. "I've collected enough information," the detective began, opening the folder. "Here are photographs and reports of where and with whom your wife spent time over the past few days." Mark looked at the photographs, not believing his eyes. In them, Anna was sitting in a cafe with Nick. Their gazes were full of warmth and intimacy. In one of the photographs, they were holding hands. The other is Nick opening the door to his apartment for Anna. The last picture, taken at night, showed Anna leaving his house. "It was yesterday," the detective explained. "She spent several hours there." Mark felt anger and pain mixed in his soul. He stared at the images, unable to look away. This was the very truth that he was so afraid to find out, but at the same time wanted to hear. The detective continued to talk, but Mark was no longer listening. He felt the blood pounding in his temples, and the world around him seemed to begin to spin faster. When he returned home, Anna greeted him with her usual smile, but now it seemed fake to Mark. He saw her in a new light, and her every gesture, every word reminded him of what he saw in the photographs. He wanted to burst out, to express everything, but he understood that he had to act carefully. At night, when Anna fell asleep, Mark sat down at the computer. He opened the folder of photographs and reports the detective had given him. He looked at every detail, studied every clue, as if he was preparing for some important project. But this project was the most difficult in his life, a project of destroying illusions. The next day, Mark made a decision. He waited until Anna left for work and called the office to take the day off. Then he went to Nick. His heart was beating like crazy, but Mark knew he had to take this step. He needed to see the man who caused the destruction of his family. When Mark approached Nick's apartment, he stood in front of the door for a long time, trying to collect his thoughts. Finally, he knocked. Nick opened the door, his face at first expressing surprise, but then a slight smile appeared on him. "Mark, if I'm not mistaken," he asked, trying to remain calm. Mark didn't waste time on politeness. "We need to talk," he said, his voice firm but calm. Nick motioned for him to come in. They sat down in the living room, and Mark began to talk. "I know about you and Anna," he began, looking intently at Nick. "I saw the photographs. I know you spend time together, but I want to understand what made you think that you could interfere in our marriage." Nick sighed, his gaze becoming serious. "Mark, I understand how you feel, and to be honest, I didn't want it to turn out this way. But sometimes feelings go beyond logic. Anna, she's special. I can't deny what I feel for her." Mark felt his hands clenched into fists. He took a deep breath, trying to maintain his composure. "Special," he repeated, his voice becoming icy. "Anna is my wife. We built our life together for 7 years. Do you understand that you are destroying not just a relationship, but a family?" Nick was silent. He didn't look away, but there was a mixture of regret and determination in his eyes. "I'm not asking you to forgive me," he finally said, "but I can't deny that Anna and we found something that can't be ignored." Mark stood up, feeling that he could no longer continue this conversation. He looked at Nick, and in his gaze there was not only pain, but also a warning. You have made your choice, he said, heading towards the door. Now it's my turn to make my own. When Mark returned home, Anna was already there. She was standing in the kitchen, preparing dinner, and when she saw him, she smiled. "You're back early," she said, but there was tension in her voice. Mark approached her, his gaze focused and cold. "We need to talk, Anna," he said quietly, "and I think you know what I mean." Anna frozen, her face turning pale. She tried to say something, but the words got stuck in her throat. Mark looked at her, waiting for an answer. Her silence only confirmed his worst fears. "I know about you and Nick," he continued. "I know everything." Anna lowered her head, her hands trembling. She knew she couldn't hide the truth any longer. This moment was inevitable, and now she had to face the consequences of her actions. Anna stood opposite Mark, feeling her breathing become heavy. His gaze, full of pain and anger, seemed to burn right through her. She couldn't find the words to start, but Mark, on the contrary, seemed to be getting ready to throw out everything that had accumulated inside. "I always believed you," he began, his voice low but breaking. "I thought that we were a team, that we were doing everything to maintain this. Our marriage, our life. But now I don't even know who you are." Anna felt her eyes fill with tears. She tried to take a step towards him, but Mark raised his hand to stop her. "Don't," he said sharply, turning away. "I don't want your apology. I want to understand. Why? What were you missing?" "We told you, Anna. We always discussed everything." "Mark," she began quietly, but her voice trembled. "It's not what you think. This. It's not what I think." His voice exploded, filled with sarcasm. "You spent the night in another man's house, Anna. What do you think I should be thinking? Why did you discuss literature until the morning?" His words cut her like a knife. She lowered her head, trying to collect her thoughts. I didn't want it to turn out like this," she whispered. "I'm confused. I don't know how to explain." "Try," he interrupted, raising his voice. "Explain to me how the woman who swore to love me ended up in the arms of another. What did I do wrong? What happened to us?" His questions struck her heart like hammer blows. She knew there was no easy answer that could justify her. "It's not because of you," she finally said, her voice shaking. "It was in me. I felt emptiness, and I didn't know how to deal with it. Nick, he just happened to be there at the moment when I was most vulnerable." Mark laughed, but it was a bitter, joyless laugh. "Vulnerable?" he asked again. "And me? I, who came home every evening, tried to be a better husband for you. I was vulnerable too, Anna. I also doubted, made mistakes, and worried. But I didn't seek solace in others, because I believed in us. I believed too." She whispered, but Mark abruptly interrupted her. "No, you didn't believe it. Because if you believed, you would come to me. You should talk to me. But instead you chose a path that destroyed everything." Tears were already streaming down her cheeks, but she didn't try to wipe them away. She knew she deserved his wrath. "Mark," she said pleadingly, taking another step towards him. "I know I made a mistake. I know I betrayed you. But I don't want to lose you. Please give me a chance to make things right." Mark looked at her with such an expression that her heart sank. "To correct?" he repeated, his voice becoming quiet, but this made it even more dangerous. "How are you going to do this, Anna? How will you regain my trust? How will you make me forget that you chose someone else instead of coming to me?" Anna didn't know what to answer. Her hands were shaking, and she felt the gap between them growing wider. "Maybe I should fix this," he continued, without waiting for her answer. "Maybe I should just close my eyes to this, pretend nothing happened. But you know what? I can't, because every time I look at you, I will see this, seeing you with him." He turned away, his shoulders trembling with suppressed emotions. Anna came closer, but he pulled away again. "I can't stand it anymore," he whispered. "I can't be in this house with you now." Anna felt her world crumble. She extended her hand, but Mark was already heading towards the door. "Mark, wait," she exclaimed. "Please don't go. Give me a chance to explain everything, to fix everything." He stopped for a moment, but didn't turn around. Maybe I'll come back when I can breathe next to you without feeling betrayed. Mark opened the door and left, leaving Anna alone, in the silence that seemed deafening. Mark left Anna's apartment with a heavy heart and a clear head. The silence of the cold morning enveloped him like a shroud, and the echoing footsteps along the flights of stairs seemed to be an echo of his internal struggle. The last weeks had been hell for him. Sleepless nights, painful doubts, and painful thoughts about their past and present. But now everything has fallen into place. He knew one thing: there was no turning back. That night, returning home, Mark sat for a long time in the dark living room without turning on the light. His mind was like a complex architectural project where every thought had to find its place in order to build a clear plan of action. An inner feeling of injustice grew, filling his entire being. He was determined to restore his dignity and punish those who betrayed his trust. The next morning, Mark took action. First of all, he collected all the evidence of Anna's betrayal. His methodical approach, the result of many years of work as an architect, helped him in this. Mark reviewed every photograph, every piece of correspondence, every detail that could become part of the mosaic of truth. He knew that he had indisputable facts in his hands, and he felt confidence growing in his soul. Every detail reminded him of the pain and humiliation he felt. Anna's correspondence with Nick was filled with words that were once intended for him. The smiles he saw in the photographs used to belong only to him. But now this evidence was his weapon. Mark knew he had to tread carefully. One wrong step, and the consequences could be devastating not only for Anna and Nick, but also for himself. First, he turned to a lawyer with whom he had previously worked. This was a reliable man whom Mark considered his ally in this battle. At the meeting, Mark outlined the situation and handed over the collected materials to the lawyer. "We will act according to the law," the lawyer said firmly. "We have every reason to file for divorce with evidence of infidelity." "But are you sure you want to see it through to the end?" Mark nodded. He left no doubt about his determination. They began to develop a strategy. In addition to the divorce, the lawyer suggested filing formal complaints with the university where Anna and Nick worked. Their actions not only violated moral standards, but also undermined professional ethics. When the time came to meet Anna, Mark felt a strange sense of calm. She tried to justify herself. Her voice trembled, but the words did not find a response in his heart. She begged him not to destroy their marriage, not to destroy her life. But Mark was adamant. The evidence spoke for itself. Their marriage was destroyed long before this conversation. The divorce process was quick and decisive. The judge, having seen the presented materials, ruled in favor of Mark. He received everything he wanted, and even more moral satisfaction from the fact that justice had triumphed. Anna, seeing that her attempts to maintain at least the appearance of a relationship had failed, left the courtroom with her head down. The next step was to take action against Anna and Nick at their workplace. Mark, with the help of a lawyer, prepared formal complaints, attaching the collected evidence. In a letter to the university administration, he emphasized the seriousness of the violation of professional ethics. Anna was an English literature teacher, and Nick was a young professional just starting his career. Their affair was not only a personal betrayal, but also a professional misconduct. The university's response was not long in coming. Anna was suspended from teaching, and an internal investigation began. Her colleagues, who had previously treated her with respect, now looked at her with condemnation. Nick, finding himself in an even more vulnerable position, was fired. His reputation was destroyed, and his career was in jeopardy. He left the university in silence, without saying goodbye to anyone. The news of the divorce and revelation spread quickly. Colleagues, students, even neighbors, everyone was discussing this scandal. Anna's reputation was destroyed. Her publications lost attention, and invitations to conferences stopped. She became an outcast in the academic world. Nick, having lost his job and support, found himself completely isolated. He tried to settle in other places, but everywhere he faced closed doors. Mark sat in his office, surrounded by silence, which pressed on him more and more every day. It seemed to him that the walls that had previously witnessed his happiness were now saturated with bitterness and regret. On the table in front of him were old photographs of him and Anna, laughing, hugging, full of dreams and hopes. These moments, when everything seemed so simple and bright, now turned into a ghost that he could not get rid of. Every smile in those pictures reminded him of what he had lost. He achieved his goal, destroyed her world, just as she once destroyed his trust. But instead of satisfaction, he felt emptiness. It was the taste of ashes, the bitter aftertaste of the realization that revenge never brings back what was lost. It seemed to him that he had become a hostage to his anger, and having freed himself from it, he had gained nothing. In the evenings, he sat for hours in front of the photographs, as if he hoped that they would speak to him, tell him where he had gone wrong, why their love had turned into ruins. Were there times when he could have made things right, or was their fate sealed? His hands, once so confident, trembled as he put the pictures back in the drawer. He could no longer look at these images of the past. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. Work became his salvation. Mark plunged into it headlong, as if he was trying to build something new on the ruins of his life. Each project was not just a task for him, but a struggle for himself, to find meaning in life again. He worked hard, avoiding unnecessary conversations and glances that still sometimes reminded him of his past. Over time, colleagues began to forget about the scandal. Life at the office returned to normal, but for Mark, the internal scars never went away. He felt like something inside him remained broken forever. Every evening when he returned to an empty house, this feeling became stronger. A broken heart could not be put back together. His consolation was temporary, like a band-aid on a wound that would not stop bleeding. Anna decided to move to another city, hoping to leave her past behind. She chose a small but lively town, where she hoped to disappear among strangers, start over, and forget about what was left behind her. The first days in the new place were full of hope. Anna rented a small apartment on the outskirts of the city, got a temporary job as a waitress in a cozy cafe, and began looking for vacancies in her professional field. However, she soon realized that the past was not so easily let go. Rumors and gossip about her betrayal leaked here to some of her former acquaintances, spread the general story on social networks, and others picked it up, spreading it further. During interviews for serious positions, she was increasingly asked awkward questions about her ugly act, which led to refusals. Gradually, she began to notice that even her colleagues in the cafe were wary of her, and sometimes openly condemned her. Her attempts to restore her reputation ended in failure. Anna tried to explain herself through posts on social networks, writing emotional appeals, but this only aggravated the situation. Every step she took was accompanied by a stream of new ridicule and accusations. Soon she deleted her pages so as not to see reminders of the past, but the feeling of shame and disappointment did not go away. Without the support of friends and family, Anna became increasingly lonely. Her days were spent endlessly thinking about what she had done wrong and what could have been changed. She blamed herself, her husband, the circumstances, but understood that the responsibility lay only with her. The nights became torture nightmares and memories of the past tormented her. Sometimes she would wake up in a cold sweat, remembering her husband's face at the moment he learned the truth. Money was getting less and less. Working in a cafe was barely enough to pay for rent and food. Anna began to think about moving to an even more remote place, but the fear of complete isolation stopped her. To distract herself, she began to read more, joined the local library, and even started keeping a diary, trying to understand her emotions. Sometimes she thought about contacting her ex-husband, but the fear of his contempt and hatred did not allow her to do this. She understood that perhaps he had already found a new life, free from her and her mistakes. The thought of starting over from scratch no longer brought relief. Her future seemed vague and devoid of prospects. One day, while walking along the embankment, Anna noticed an advertisement for volunteers at a local homeless shelter. Hoping to find some meaning in her life, she decided to try. Working at the orphanage was difficult, but she began to find some comfort in it. By helping others, she tried to drown out the pain of her own mistakes. There, she met people who had also experienced difficult moments in their lives, and their stories helped her understand that everyone has a chance at redemption. But the past still weighed on her. Every day was a struggle for Anna against social condemnation, loneliness, and herself. Mark's revenge became a lesson for everyone who watched this story. She showed how far a person can go to defend his dignity and what price he has to pay for it. Mark knew there was no turning back, but he also understood that life goes on. Now he was looking not only for justice, but also for a way to find peace in his soul. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think, click to the next one. Click to the next one. Click to the next one.